Today, I'm going to attempt the impossible, which is talk a book that's already been talked about a million times. And that is giving my, not a review, but just my thoughts and feelings on Matt Dinniman's Dungeon Crawler Carl. So, yes, I finally read Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's been sitting in my Audible library forever. So, I'll put over here, even though everyone knows what the cover looks like, I finally read it. It was okay. And that's the spoiler. The too long didn't watch, it was just okay. I didn't absolutely love it, even though there are a ton of people that did. So that is why I'm just going to talk about what resonated with me as a fan of the genre, but this particular humor, at least here in the first book, didn't land at, yeah, like an all timer, which is for a lot of people. So, what is Dungeon Crawler Carl? If you clicked on this, you probably know what the book is about. But in the off chance you've never heard of Dungeon Crawler Carl, the internet sensation that is the bestseller is about a Coast Guard employee Carl who just gets sucked into a game, a dungeon. The earth turns into a giant dungeon. So it's sort of like an isekai anime trope where our hero protagonist gets transported to another world. But in this case, it's just Earth, and Earth has been transformed into a maze like dungeon like a video game. It is a lit RPG, and in this dungeon Carl must survive and make his way all the way to the lowest level and defeat the evil corporation that is broadcasting his and other crawlers antics for entertainment from others. So in a nutshell, yes, it's isekai. It is a hero portal fantasy, a hero transport to another world. I've seen this, read this in other material. Not to say that Dungeon Crawler Carl doesn't do some interesting things. It's not a totally unique genre, which is totally fine. There are every season for anime, there's like 5 or 6 isekai anime where the main character is on some sort of leveling up broken system. In this case, Carl isn't really broken at the start. He doesn't reincarnate in like a new body with new powers, but he can get progressively stronger. He starts gaining stats like in a video game. And that's, I think, to where it didn't land with me 100%. Not to start on too much of a negative. Let me maybe flip that with the positives. With the positives, yes, as a fan of video games myself, it's cool to see video games. I do enjoy that lit RPG progression fantasy sort of system. I really enjoyed solo leveling, which, yes, on the same token, it's our love or hate relationship. Solo leveling was fun. Reading the webtoon, the webcomic originally when it came out. I love that power fantasy of the main character. I love the anime, just seeing Sun Jin-woo just destroy everything and keep getting stronger. I think that's what we're going to eventually get in Dungeon Crawler Carl. So I can see the potential. I know it's going to be there. It is a very light-hearted read. This is constantly recommended on Reddit and elsewhere for an entry to the fantasy genre because at its heart, it still is fantasy, which is my wheelhouse. I love fantasy novels, and this novel is like a sort of stereotypical fantasy, like a Dungeons and Dragons fantasy, because it's a dungeon itself, but it's also got your typical fantasy monsters like goblins and other monsters. It's got loot exactly like you'd find in a D&D campaign. So right up my alley right there. It is very easy and accessible. There's not really any mind-bending concepts, and it does hold your hand the entire way as you get introduced to this world. And I think that is what got me. It was a little maybe too basic. Maybe I've just been reading too much highbrow entertainment like Gene Wolfe, Book of the New Sun, and other more philosophical takes on the sci-fi fantasy genre that to be toilet humor, it's not toilet humor, but to be more lowbrow, easily accessible, just didn't land 100% for me. Not that I can't enjoy that. I watch tons of movies and other anime that are lowbrow, like solo leveling. It's not the highest art form in storytelling, but it's still enjoyable. And Dungeon Crawler Carl was like that. It is just a middle of the road. It wasn't something I was totally obsessed over. It is fun. It is easy, but to talk about some critiques, system itself was, I felt, overly explained. So the book does go into great detail of what exactly is going on, which can be a pro if you've never played a video game before or are very unfamiliar. But it was a bit of a con to me because I sort of knew what was happening. I didn't need to get into all the weeds of the menus and Carl understanding menus and learning menus. That maybe if he just got it, it would have just sped up some of those tutorial sort of aspects of this first book, which may be the whole point of the first book. It is a setup to the larger world. This is the ongoing series. I think there's book 8 as of now in 2026. So you do have a lot more meat to the series going forward to delve into. And I'm sure the later books are not going to re-explain these basic core concepts as you kind of scale up in the difficulty as we get to the lower levels, as Carl advances his levels, as he gains new powers, as Donut gains new powers. You don't need to explain all these old terms again. So the first book, it does have that first book syndrome of explaining everything that is happening here. With that said, the struggles were, again, maybe it's a pro or a con. Some of the villains, when they cut and freeze to a boss battle, I can imagine it in my head. So the writing was very descriptive. It was great. I felt like I was reading, seeing a video game in my mind, which could be a pro or con, depending on if that's what you're looking for. It was fun to see that, but it did sort of definitely take you out of the immersion. This isn't like hard fantasy. This is video game fantasy. If that's what you're looking for, it's great. It does have that video game cinematic feel. And again, another positive is that the writing and the core world that's being built here is pretty bleak. So the actual humans turn into like slaves, pets for this alien race. And there is a complex sort of backstory going on in the background. So that was definitely a positive. I liked learning about this evil corporation that's controlling everything for viewers. So you can also maybe think of it as a, not to be, another comparison, but omniscient reader's viewpoint, which I think came out maybe afterwards, but again, not a unheard of genre. Omniscient reader's viewpoint is similar in that the heroes are sort of get transported, or they stay on Earth, but the Earth gets transported into a game, into a system that's broadcast to viewers in another dimension. So it's very, very similar to Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I liked Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. I think the webtoon, the original online manhwa comic, was great. It was very bleak, so it's very similar, but just slightly different in execution. Not a bad thing. I love reading, the same types of things again, as long as they're doing something different and interesting. And this was more set up, and it will get into that later. So it was good or bad. I think I can definitely recommend this. I see why it's recommended to everyone because it's very accessible. If you've never read a fantasy book, much like Sanderson is recommended all the time, which I also loved, but I felt I grew out of. I loved Way of Kings at first. I mean, it's still a great book. The first two of the Stormlight are really great. I think the 3 and 4 and 5 were a little bit lower, but I don't really reach for Sanderson anymore. I've tried some of his other books. Just using that as an example that Sanderson is a good entry point to fantasy, but then sometimes your taste change, your taste mature, and you want just something different out of your books. Similar for Dungeon Crawler Carl, to back on subject. I think Dungeon Crawler Carl could be the perfect intro to reading in general. If you want that lighthearted read, if you're not looking for complex characters yet, I think there's this, again, a sliver of that happening in this book that will get there. So it's very intro friendly, beginner friendly to enter the genre. But that's not to say it doesn't have something for anyone because it has that mass market appeal. I think you can enjoy it. The humor may land for you. It didn't totally stick for me. You may enjoy that type of humor. Humor is definitely subjective. All art is subjective. So I will say you should give it a try. I don't regret my time in the world. It's a very fast read. It's an easy read. It didn't just make me, obsessed over it though. So I wasn't like 100%. This wasn't a 10 out of 10 for me. It was a good, like a 3.5 out of 5. It was above average, but not anything that I really remember. Nothing stands out having read it a couple weeks ago. So it's not a book that stuck with me yet, even though, yes, the characters are memorable. Carl and Donut are great, but I don't really remember the specific details of some of the bosses and the monsters and the other crawlers they met. It was sort of just a bit of a blur. Nothing really stood out. Again, very first book sort of material. So That said, I think you should check it out. That was my contribution. So, what did I miss? Why is it an all timer? Should I continue on to book 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 and 8? Let me know. Thanks for watching and hope you have a good reading time. And what are you reading? Should I continue? Talk to you later. This is Rambling. Bye.